This is Wildcat Country.
Larson tipped it. Love has it. Lewis slams it, and Arizona wins it.
The inside scoop on the Arizona Wildcats.
It's Gunnar Maldonado. He's got blockers. Touchdown, Arizona.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to bear down.
Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country presented by Harrah's Auction Casino. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale. And, you know, it's amazing how things have flipped in a year, Shane. A year ago, we're sitting here, we're talking about, so excited about Arizona's Alamo Bowl matchup. The basketball team is good. I mean, this is pretty much as bad as it gets for Wildcat fans, isn't it?
Well, so I've decided this is what's happened, Eric. On December 28th, 2023, Arizona won the Alamo Bowl. You and I and my nephew Zach were all together watching it. We were going crazy when Gunnar Maldonado had the fumble return. Great day. Future looks bright. December 29th, 2023, an ASU fan summoned Satan himself and says, I can't handle this. This is not acceptable. I will sell my soul to turn this around. And he had it was a series of requests involved, including Arizona has to suck and ASU has to make the college football playoff just to completely rub it in. And we have to destroy them in Tucson, of course. The basketball team, we have to take their best recruit and he'll become our best player. And, oh, by the way, our hockey team, which Arizona does not have a D1 hockey team, is going to beat the number one team in the country. Only thing we don't know is whether it was his soul or whether it was some other deal. We'll have to find out what the payment's going to be. Right now, we're in the middle of that deal, Eric. We're all in the middle of it, and we're going to have to ride it out until we get on the other side. Oh, by the way, our basketball team, not only do they steal our top recruit, but their team ends up being pretty good, and we end up being an average team this year too. So
You know, and you can't take anything away from what they've done. They've had a heck of a year. ASU's had a heck of a year, but it was fun for many years to always say Arizona has been in a big bowl game more recently than ASU.
Yeah.
And you can't say that because Arizona 2014 Fiesta Bowl. ASU had not been in a marquee bowl game since 1996 or January of 97, the Rose Bowl. And you can't say that anymore. And it's a tough pill to swallow.
And I guarantee there are a lot of Arizona fans that were rooting big time for SMU, big comeback. And then they're thinking, okay, good. SMU is going to win and ASU is going to have to travel to Austin to play Texas. And then Clemson has the big kick return, and the rest is history. I guess the only positive for Wildcat fans is ASU did not get the Fiesta Bowl, which I think a lot of fans thought that they would. And they have to go all the way out to Georgia. But yeah, it's this team's got some magic. They do. It's something else. I still think they're, in terms of overall talent, they're probably middle of the Big 12, but they keep putting it together.
Kenny Dillingham's done a great job. Should be National Coach of the Year, in my opinion. All right.
Yes.
Do we have any Shane standouts? Do you have anything for us this week? I know it's tough, but I'm just checking.
No.
All right.
I'm not going to give anything out for beating Southern Utah. Okay. I will mention the volleyball team. They got shafted and not making the NCAA tournament, but they won their first matchup and congratulations to them. But it is slim pickings right now, I'll tell you.
All right, it's time for Buy or Sell, which is presented by our friends at Ice Shaker. Go to iceshaker.com, use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, and get $5 off your first purchase. After you do that, make sure to fill out the post-purchase survey and mention Wildcat Country. All right, Shane, number one, Arizona football. Are you loving every minute? And I use that last part in quotes, which is something that Brent Brennan said last week. You will love every minute. Are you loving every minute?
Who did that song? Loving every minute of it. It's an 80s song. I'm trying to remember right now. I actually like the song, but I can't remember who did it. But yeah, no, I'm not. It's not fun. In a way, you kind of get to this, that meme of the person and like looking inside the window going, yes, like the sicko committee thing. It's almost like that at this point. Like, what else is going to happen? And then you think, okay, we got a good recruiting class coming in, and then Robert McDaniel, he's got a date and time set the next day to sign, and then he does it. And I know he's not the only one who does it, and if it was the other way around, we would love it. So I'm not going after him. That's fine. It just feels like more of the same. But yeah, no. I'm waiting to see what's going to happen with the coordinators, obviously, and I think that's going to have a big domino effect as far as what Arizona does in the portal. They got to make that decision quick, because recruiting is a marathon and the portal is definitely a sprint, and they got a couple chances at it, but they need to make those decisions quickly. I know Brent Brennan had mentioned that someone who was coaching this past weekend was a possible candidate for offensive coordinator, so we'll see if that ends up coming to fruition. DC, is it going to be Danny Gonzalez or someone externally? But they need to make those decisions. Until then, just kind of a wait and see. And I think all Arizona fans have is you're rooting for Texas to beat Clemson and then go to Georgia and whip ASU.
So last week, I was doing my CBS. We were doing the online version of my show because they had soccer on CBS Sports Net, and so I asked one of our college football experts, I won't name which one, off the air. I said, so did Arizona make the right move in keeping Brent Brennan? And he said, absolutely not. I said,
that's what most people would say right now. Yeah.
And I said, why not? And he said, small time. And I mean, you take that is a national perspective, somebody that has zero vested interest in Arizona's program.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you can be encouraged after anything that's gone on. And once again, I hope next year we're sitting here, Arizona makes a bowl game. We go, you know what, Brent, great job. We were wrong.
Yeah.
But can you ever see Arizona doing what ASU is doing under Brent Brennan? Absolutely not. No chance. You can't.
Yeah. I have a challenge for fans, actually, those who are listening to the show. If you could comment on X or on YouTube or whatever, and just say, can you think of a situation where a coach did this poorly in year one, relative to expectations? I mean, obviously, Jed Fish was 1-11, but everyone expected that.
Right.
Relative to first-year expectations and talent coming back, did that poorly a job and then ended up being a pretty good head coach? I mean, it's not even a rhetorical question. I don't know. I would love to know the answer, to know if there are some out there. I'm not as good a historian outside of the state of Arizona and this rivalry and the U of A specifically. I don't know enough to answer that question, but I'd be interested to see, because again, it's one thing to have to work from the ground up, which is what Mike Stoops did very successfully for a while, and what Jed Fish did. But this is a whole other situation, and I think we're going to see a lot of roster turnover, and that might not be a bad thing.
So we're going to have our buddy Matt Moreno, the professor, join us in segment number 2. We're going to talk everything about transfer portal, recruiting, and the future of Arizona football with him. But before we get to Moreno, the transfer portal thus far for Arizona has been pretty bad. Noah Fifita, Genesis Smith, seemingly the only two notable Arizona players who have not declared that have eligibility left. Do you expect, just your personal expectation, any of these guys to come back? I mean, I don't think there's any harm in looking in the transfer portal, but this is getting ridiculous, Shane. 20-some players already, and nightmarish.
Not surprised. And I think, look, I think that was going to happen even if Arizona had a good season. I mean, that happened the first couple of years with Jed Fish. That happened as well. So I'm not surprised. There were reports that Noah Fifita was going to transfer, and then reports that he's going to stay. And I think probably it's somewhere in the middle, whereas he's probably testing the waters, but he's not definitely out, like some people said. And I said it halfway through the season, Eric, that I feel like Noah Fifita sort of being punished for being so loyal, and then in hindsight, maybe he should have just done what most players do and done what was best for himself. Not necessarily just chase the money, but maybe find a situation where it was a better fit for him as a football player, because his development went in the wrong direction his second year. And I'm not good enough to know if that falls mostly on him or the coaching staff or the strength and conditioning, or a combination there. It's probably a combination, one more than the other. But I want him to do what's best for himself, and a fresh start might not be the worst thing. I'm not saying I hope he goes, but Brent Brennan's done a decent job in bringing on some decent quarterbacks. And I think I'm kind of torn on it, because we had him on the show a couple times before he even played it down at Arizona. Yep. Real sharp guy.
Yep. But
now that all his Servite guys are gone, maybe a fresh start would be best. It's not. I mean, there's quitting on a program, and then there's just like doing what is best for your future. And I think that from that perspective, maybe Noah leaving would be the best. I think I expect Arizona to do well in the transfer portal. I expect it, like, as a fan, they need to. Mm-hmm. And I suspect that they will, But I think even if Brent Brennan can turn things around, just because of the attrition you're seeing, Arizona is definitely going to be facing another rough season next year. Even if Brent Brennan does eventually turn the ship around, it's going to take a little while.
Yeah, if I'm Noah, there's no way I stick around this. If you can get an offer that is legitimate, I think you got to go. I don't see it. Does the decision in your mind to keep Brennan that Desiree Reed-Francois made last week look even more foolish based on what you've seen in the transfer portal?
No, I feel the same way.
Okay.
I'm not optimistic about it. You know, like I said, I defended Brent Brennan. I obviously hope he does well, and I think he certainly can turn things around. The number one thing he's best at is building relationships, as we saw last year. So he has that. And then, of course, when you bring new coordinators in, we'll know a lot more. But no, I think, again, it goes back to finances. And a year from now, I think Arizona is going to be in better financial shape. I mean, it can't really be worse, but I think Desiree Reed-Francois is going to do a good job of turning things around financially for the program and for the athletic department, to the point where if things don't go well in year two, then she'll be more comfortable making a move and better positioned to hire a coach, not just hire a coach, but retain a top coach who can turn this program around if Brent Brennan doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, right now, not much to say. I guess number two, Shane, buy or sell Arizona's or ASU's success, and what we've seen in football. And I guess you can, talk about basketball. It's the worst case scenario. Like, this is probably almost as bad as it can get for us right now, buy or sell.
Yeah, there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people who are my kind of in my boat as far as a fan, where as in we're from the Valley. We root for all the Valley sports teams except ASU. Not an ASU hater, but obviously can't root for them. We root for U of A and all the Valley sports teams. Worst case scenario right there. I could have told you, and I'm telling you, I was telling people this. I didn't tweet it out because I don't want to come off as bitter all the time. But I said, you know what? ASU wins. That means, it means the Cardinals are going to lose to the Seahawks the next day. Because the Valley is not allowed. I know it sounds stupid, but I've been here for 40 years. The Valley is not allowed to have more than one good team at a time. And right now, it happens to be the team I can't root for. It was the Diamondbacks last year, the Suns a couple of years before that. Of course, their run to the finals cost the Coyotes. And yes, I am that bitter. I know I'm going off on a very illogical tangent right here, but to answer your question, it doesn't get much worse than the scenario I laid out at the beginning of the show with the deal with the devil, no pun intended. Let me just say this though, because when I was a kid, and even when I was a younger adult, I would let my daily mood be impacted way too much by how my sports teams do or didn't do. Okay. And as an Arizona sports fan, that is not a good thing. Okay. So I'm just saying, if you're one of those people, because I've had to take a step back, I don't watch as much of those teams as I used to. I'm more of a fair weather fan just for my own health. Like even last week, I ended up watching the end of the Cardinals Vikings game, which was a big mistake. Oh, they're winning. And then they lose by a point. Afterwards, I was a little short with my 5-year-old son in a way I wouldn't have been had I not watched that game. It was just another reminder. There are a lot of kids, but even a lot of grownups who your daily mood is impacted by how your sports teams do. And I'm saying right now, take a step back. It's not that big a deal. We have to remind ourselves of that in the bad times. But it's also good to remind ourselves of that in the good times. This is supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to impact your relationships, your work performance. And I know most people aren't like that, but some people are. I used to sort of be that way. So I'm just saying, remember the bigger picture. It's supposed to be fun, and things. The pendulum always swings, remember that. Embrace the good times. The good times will be back one way or the other eventually. Embrace those as well, because it is fleeting.
All right, let's talk good hypothetical. 2023 Arizona versus 2024 ASU. Who would you give the advantage to? Now, we'll ask Moreno the same thing in the next segment, but before he answers, give us your pick.
Yeah, it'd be nice if we had more examples like for the same year, like 2014 Arizona versus 2014 ASU. But yeah,
right.
I have to go with ASU, wouldn't you? I mean, number one, better record. Number two, they're in the college football playoff. Even if the college football playoff was 12 teams last year, I don't think Arizona would have made it. I think they'd lost 3 games, so they would have been on the outside looking in anyway. So better record. I think in terms of talent, and I said this a few weeks ago, and I still believe it, I think Arizona top to bottom had more talent and more depth than this ASU team did. ASU's just putting it together like no other team is. And that's to your point, Dillingham coach of the year, because I think Scadaboo's great. They have some other great players on both sides of the ball, but they're not that deep a team. They're not that talented a team. And they just keep getting better every single week and just mopping the floor with a very good Iowa State team without one of its top players on offense is very impressive. I don't know if Arizona could have done that without Tedero McMillan or Jacob Cowing last year. So as much as I enjoyed Arizona last year, I got the Alamo Bowl football behind me, and I still cherish that season. I think you got to go with 2024 ASU.
So here's the argument that I would go against that, Shane. Arizona played a much tougher schedule. They played, 7 ranked teams, and they played them in a succession of, including the bowl game, but they played 5 ranked teams in a row and 6 out of 7 weeks. And Colorado at one point was ranked last year, and Arizona went on a winning streak and pretty much, didn't lose a game by more than a touchdown. The at Mississippi State was a tough one early on. If Noah Fifita plays, it could be a different story. Just like you could say if Sam Levitt played against Cincinnati, different story. They lost to Washington. If Fifita had
been the starter at the beginning of the year, then you certainly have an argument. Absolutely.
Noah's first start was against the team that ended up in the national championship game and was undefeated at the time, undefeated all the way until that game. And they lost by a touchdown. Then they went to USC, and Jed Fish should have gone for 2 and should have taken a shot at the win there. He did not, and they lost in triple overtime. And after that, they didn't lose a game. I think Arizona, talent-wise, with you look at ASU's team, I don't think there are multiple first-round picks on that roster. On Arizona's team last year, there are probably 4 first-round picks: Jordan Morgan, Savigny, Takario Davis, and Tedero McMillan.
Yeah,
and ASU's probably got none. So, in my opinion, I'm going with the more talented team, which is better coached. I probably ASU a little bit. I was a little critical of Jed's coaching, but that team got hot, and it was running the perfect scheme. And I think Arizona on the lines of scrimmage were so much. Scadaboo is a beast. Don't get me wrong, but Arizona's defense last year was really good.
Yeah.
You can see Bill Norton is playing at Texas. He's for a reason.
Well, and the depth they had too is that was one of the things about last year's Arizona team was that they had such an advantage in the fourth quarter, especially when they were on defense, because they could rotate guys in and out of that D line all day long and not lose much talent at all. The other team would be sucking wind, and Arizona would be fresh. And that's how Arizona, they made a late rally to beat Oregon State, and they pulled away from UCLA late. Of course, the fourth quarter against Oklahoma as well. So that was something. It wasn't just the talent; it was the depth. So in terms of depth, Arizona all day. In terms of the results and probably lean coaching as well, I think you have to go ASU.
I guess. We're gonna just disagree on this one. I just think that Arizona team last year, if they had gotten a chance to be in a pack, the Pac-12 had 2 elite teams, and the Big 12 had nobody. BYU is good. That was a good win for ASU. But there's nobody, Shane, in this conference this year that is even close to Washington or Oregon last year in the Pac-12.
Well, like I said, if SMU had beaten Clemson, ASU would have been the 5th best conference winner, and they would have been probably the last seed into the into the college football playoff. So
they would have been the 11 or 12 seed, and they're going to either Penn State or Texas. And we'll talk about our picks later on. I just wanted to throw that hypothetical out there. Let us know what you think on X or on YouTube. 2023 Arizona or 2024 ASU. Let's talk a little basketball here, Shane, before the big game this weekend in Phoenix against UCLA. So KJ Lewis coming off the bench seemed like it actually worked, and maybe it's the spark that Arizona needs. Buy or sell?
I'll buy maybe. We've seen this against crap teams in McHale. They're 3-0 against teams they should mop the floor with. I guess 4-0 if you count Davidson. They beat bad teams. They lose or very competitive. They're a very average team. They've beaten bad teams. They've lost close games to average teams, and they've gotten their butt kicked by good teams. So until that changes, I think on paper, I think Arizona has one of the most talented 10-player rosters in the country. I still believe that. You can disagree with me that all day long. So logic would suggest at some point they're going to put it together, but I don't know if they did that against Southern Utah. I'm sorry, but who cares? They did, if they won that game by single digits, I would be concerned. But they got to beat a good team. They got to do it away from McHale, even though I'm sure Phoenix will maybe have mostly Arizona fans there. Until that happens, I'm still very much in like I tweeted out, beat UCLA and we'll talk. Until then, I'm not that interested.
I should hate to admit this on a Wildcat Country podcast. I had Southern Utah plus 28 the other day, and I thought it was a good bet.
I would have too. If I didn't bet it, but I would have.
I knew Arizona was going to win the game, but I said, okay, they win by 24, 23, and they put it on them pretty good. So it gives me some encouragement heading into Saturday against UCLA, which I think personally is a make or break game. Buy or sell.
Yeah, I said the same thing last week. Yeah, big one. This is their last big non-conference game. Now, of course, they're going to have plenty of opportunities for conference wins this year. But yeah, I think it's massive for going into Big 12 play to say, okay, we're on the right track now. These losses, they happen. We can't do anything about them now. We're still on track for the tournament. All our goals are still in front of us. I think losing this game is going to just maybe reinforce, look, there's something just wrong. There's something just not clicking with this team. And I think that sometimes you can fake it till you make it. Like, going back to ASU football, they won a lot of close games earlier in the season that if they had gone differently, their season might have gone completely different.
Sure. Yeah.
When you find a way to win, even when you're not playing your best, even when things aren't clicking that well, if they go in and beat a very good UCLA team, which just beat number 12 Oregon, if they go in and beat them even by a point or two in Phoenix, I think it's just the morale is going to improve. The belief is going to be there. And I think from that perspective, I think it's as massive a game as you can get in this calendar year for Arizona basketball.
Absolutely a must-win game. No question about it. If Arizona loses in the state of Arizona to UCLA, we are having legitimate, is this team NCAA tournament bound conversations like we had brought up last week. I always want to thank our top sponsor, Harrah's Auction Casino, for being the lead sponsor for Wildcat Country. Bear down, Wildcat fans, because it's time to spin to win up to $6,000 at Harrah's Auction Casino. It's easy to sign up for Caesars Rewards, play your favorite slots, and earn entries to spin the wheel for your chance to win up to $6,000 in free slot play. It's even better. You'll get $10 in free slot play just for signing up. And the more you play, the more entries you'll receive. So get ready to spin to win only at Harrah's Auction Casino. Play for all. And if you have no New Year's Eve plans, check out Midland at Harrah's Auction Casino. The U of A alum, apparently, as a lead singer. Speaking of U of A, well, that's what Wildcat Country is. Let's bring on the professor. Get your pens and pencils ready. We're going to have a quiz, maybe a final exam, with the professor, Matt Moreno, here on Wildcat Country.
When you're on the golf course and it's 100 degrees outside, you know what's great? The ice shaker, which keeps your water cold.
You heard the man. Get your custom Arizona Wildcats ice shaker now at iceshaker.com.
Shane, this might be our final exam time, and there's no better person to have on than the professor, as I like to call him, Matt Moreno from rivals.com. I mean, there's a lot we're going to get to in this interview, and we're used to having you on and being happy and upbeat, and tonight, not so much. All right, I'm going to start you off with a hard one. Shane and I talked about this in the first segment. If you were to play a hypothetical matchup between 2023 Arizona and 2024 ASU, who would you predict to win and why?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think there's a little bit more talent with Arizona. I think there's a little bit more magic probably with this ASU team. I think Arizona was probably closer to what it truly was by the end of the season in terms of the players they had on board, how well they were playing, and kind of living up to their potential. I think there's a lot of guys on ASU who are outplaying probably their talent level, and I think that's nothing to discredit what ASU's done and doing right now. I mean, they're on a roll, and you want to be hot at the right time, and they definitely have something right now that they've captured that I think Arizona would have loved to have had last year. A little bit of that magic. Obviously, it's a different situation. You're not playing, 12 teams going into the playoff and all that type of situation, but I'm probably taking last year's Arizona team just purely based on talent, but I think it would be close. I think it would be a fun game, but kind of depends on what point of the year too. If you're talking like early November, maybe late October, Arizona's feeling pretty good. End of the season right now could be more of a toss up. I mean, Man, ASU, they really have kind of captured something, but I think Arizona was more built on like, no, these guys can actually play. There's a lot of talent within this team and they're playing well. I think I'd have to take Arizona in that matchup, but it would be fun.
Yeah, what's funny is when I was peddling my first book, I did a whole bunch of hypothetical matchups like that. Like the 19, I don't know, what was it 1998 Arizona versus 1996 ASU or something like that. It is several like that. We have to do it that way because it's very rare that both teams are good at the same time. Unfortunately, it's only twice in the last 40 years that both teams have been ranked when they played each other. But as much as I'd love to talk about the Sun Devils the rest of this segment, let's talk about Arizona. For the second straight year, Matt, Arizona loses its potential quarterback of the future. Obviously, we know why Damon Williams left for Washington. What was the story with Robert McDaniel?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just the situation with Dino Babers and uncertainty about, what's going to happen at the offensive coordinator position. And UCLA came in and said, hey, we have an offensive coordinator picked out. This is who he is, and this is what he's done. And I think there was, that was kind of the situation that came into play. It's funny because Cal was prepared to make a move. And that was, the day before signing day, Robert McDaniel was saying, I'm going to sign at 2:30 with
Yeah,
Arizona.
he
And
had
I think
a date and time and everything. Yeah,
I think he fully believed that. There had been some rumblings of, hey, if Cal loses out on its guy, which Oregon was trying to flip, Jaren Sanga Polutele, and Oregon was really trying to work hard to get him to flip late into that recruitment. The thought was, if that happens, Cal's going to come back and go after Robert McDaniel, who was committed there first. He was committed there to Cal before he picked Arizona.
okay.
And when he didn't sign, I said, okay, Cal's making their move. And then kind of UCLA became this dark horse late in that day where it's like, oh, they could be getting to the picture. They parted ways with Eric Bieniemy and quickly make a decision. And it was really a matter of who can make the fastest and quickest decision on what they're going to do at the offensive coordinator spot. And, that ended up being UCLA. Um, you know, he had Indiana in position to um, at least court Julian Lewis, which is a big deal. I mean, to have Indiana and play with a five-star quarterback, that says some things. And so, when you look at, who they're bringing over and that whole situation, I think it was just what was most comfortable for a player who's really trying to make a decision in a short amount of time. And this is one of those things where you want to be the haves and not the have-nots
Yeah.
because you want to be in the position to be like, hey, we're going to make this late run or we're going to be able to hold on. So it's sometimes not advantageous to be the one that's trying to hold on to recruit because it's just kind of how these things play out, no matter if the signing period is in February, if it's in late December, now if it's in early December, there's going to be programs that when it gets closer to the signing period, they're going, hey, let's just make a run at this guy and see what happens. And recruits, as we know, are impressionable and a lot of things happen. And it goes like, well, I need to make a decision now. Let's go there. And I think that's kind of not necessarily what happened, but again, it changed in a very quick amount of time where Robert McDaniel is looking at, picking Arizona, signing with Arizona to then putting on a UCLA hat. And so it's just kind of how things go. I think if you look at it, it was just the uncertainty about what the position is going to look like at Arizona at offensive coordinator and, how that all plays out. And it was somebody came through and said, hey, this is going to be our guy. This is what it looks like. And I think that's just kind of what went out here.
I do remember something Jed Fish said when he was at Arizona about when you, unlike other sports, football more than any other sport, you have to court guys even more after they commit because everyone else is going to be after him. Especially if you find a diamond in the rough, everyone's, it's like blood in the water, So one of those things, like you said, Noah Fifita, your best guess is he? I know a lot of it depends on who gets hired as offensive coordinator. Does he stay or does he go? Your best prediction?
It's so difficult. It is so difficult. I think right now, based on what we've seen so far and who's entered the portal from Arizona, feels likely that he ends up at least testing the waters. I think that's going to become the common theme is you see a lot of players saying, let's just see what's out there, see what the opportunities are. It's obviously all legal. You can enter the portal and have some numbers thrown your way and figure out what it's going to look like. And that's kind of where we're at. And, obviously Jacob Manu entering, Kean Burnett, those are a couple of those Servite guys. You see those guys enter the portal. That feels like, well, there's another piece, that's part of that group that's missing for now. And we'll see what happens with him. But maybe a couple weeks ago I would have felt differently, but it just feels like based on what we've seen so far, early on in the portal, that it's at the very least, I would not be surprised if he tests the waters and see what else is out there. It almost behooves him to do so because it's like, what does it hurt to go look and see what else is out there? If Arizona's still gonna, regardless, Arizona's still gonna have to make its pitch and try and keep him on board no matter what happens, but and have a number for him that works. But it almost behooves every player to enter the portal. I'm surprised that honestly, I know there's so many and there's like thousands that enter the portal that everybody just doesn't do it because it's like, why not see what else is out there? Not everybody has the luxury of someone like Noah Fifita where you're going to have your roster spot. Everything's going to be fine if you come back to Arizona. But why not test it out and see what else is out there and see, what those options are, because you're talking about real life money now. It's not, it's not kind of under the table and what we had kind of known had gone on for years and years. Yep. It's all above board and it's all legal, and so
it's not tax free anymore.
Yeah, and so there's no paper bags. It's all contracts and all that type of thing. So you really do have to kind of see what else is out there. And if I'm in a position like that where I know teams would be interested in Noah Fifita. It's just that's what's gonna happen. Probably some very big name teams. And so if you're in that spot, I don't think it hurts anybody to at least test the water. I think it'll be very commendable if he decides not to do that. I think it says a lot about him. I think no one has ever second-guessed his character or anything, his dedication to Arizona. But I think it would say a lot about him if he doesn't even decide to enter the portal and says, you know what, I'm locked in with Arizona. I think that would go a long way to convincing other transfers that they're going to have to look at, because there are eventually going to be some of these guys that are in the portal already who are going to decide, hey, Arizona's not the place for me. So you're going to have to go get some more guys. And I think it would do a lot in terms of getting Arizona, up to speed with some of the other transfers that they're eventually going to want.
I heard from an ASU source that I trust that Sam Levitt has an offer for 3 years and $7 million from I don't know which team, but it just shows what kind of wild world there is out there. And if you're Noah and you can get $1 million a year somewhere, I'm not saying he's going to coming off that year. Probably
well,
go and
the irony is he probably could have gotten more if he had left last year.
Yeah, but I mean, he wanted to stay with this guys. I get it.
I know I'm saying he's getting punished for being loyal.
Oh, he is right. Sure. Yeah. Matt, tell us something like positive about the future of Arizona football, because let's just go back to basics here. Shane and I are struggling.
I still, and we've talked about this before, I still really believe in their evaluations. I think, yes, the recruiting class didn't turn out the way everybody wanted, and losing Robert McDaniel is a big deal. But I think if you look at some of the other guys that are in the class and continue to look at, what's going to become available, I think in the transfer portal, I think it's that you can still trust the evaluations of this staff when it comes to recruiting players. And maybe I think less highly of that now than I did several months ago. But I think when you saw that Robert McDaniel becomes a very clear target for other programs, you talk about Isaiah Mizell becoming somebody that really exploded and Gio Richardson becoming somebody that other programs wanted. Arizona was early with those guys. And that's what I talked about, I think, when Brent Brennan was first hired, how much I trusted just this staff's evaluation skills. And I think that doesn't go away. And so I think that it'll be a matter of really trying to figure out exactly how to kind of make that all work and make that work for them. But I think at its core, you want to have a staff that is able to understand what types of players it wants and what types of players it needs to have success. And I think they're very good about that. And so it's not great right now. I understand, how Arizona fans are feeling, and I think they have every right to feel that way. It was supposed to look different this season. And, that's very fair. But I think, this staff still does know how to evaluate talent. And I think it's just about figuring out how to recruit at a high level and make sure that those guys that they're identifying early get to campus. And so we'll see how that all plays out. And, I think one thing that I told you that I said they couldn't fall into was kind of feeling like they were still at San Jose State. And I think there's been some moments with guys where it was like, no, you can push a little bit harder. You are at Arizona. You are at a power program. You can push a little harder and get that guy. You're not, at little San Jose State trying to battle a big dog. Like, you have talent on this roster that a previous staff got in some cases, but shows that it's possible to get some of those guys at Arizona. And so I think, again, if they can just understand, like, no, you can compete with a lot of top programs and still get very good players. I think that's something that they kind of maybe need to break through a little bit more, as they go into this next year.
Do you think that the fans' criticism of Brent Brennan and everything, Shane and I are calling this Machiavickian. I mean, that's because what it is. I don't know if you were around for the Machiavic days, but when Shane and I were in school, but it was like as low as a football program can get, like 70-7 every day. Like, that's how everybody felt. Is it fair for Brent Brennan after one season to be grouped in the Makovic Sumlin category or no?
I'm not there yet. I think there were enough signs that like, hey, this thing can go right, that it's not appropriate yet to put him there. I think some things need to change. I think there needs to be some serious evaluations, and we know that there will be, and it sounds like there will be, of the coaching staff and really the operation from top to bottom and figuring out, okay, why did this go the way it did? And so it's going to take Brent Brennan taking a hard look at himself, at the staff, and figuring out who is bringing us what we want and who is not. And there's going to be some tough decisions. That's hard to do as a coach because if you look up and down the profession, coaches like to hire people that they're familiar with. A lot of times they're friends. And so that's hard to make those decisions when your friend isn't holding up his end of the bargain or is a reason for why a team is not performing well. And you have to make that decision of like, hey, we're moving on. And so um, you see it a lot where coaches, they want to feel comfortable with their staff and they want to feel like, hey, I can turn to this coach and he knows exactly what I'm thinking kind of before I'm thinking it. And so I understand the comfort factor of that and wanting to have those people around. But then you get into a situation where, hey, he's not holding up his end of the bargain here. And now you have to make a tough decision. I think those are going to be some of the discussions that Brent Brennan has to have with his staff, with himself, and figure out, okay, what do we need to address? Because I think nobody can say that really truly any part went well or went as expected or went as they had hoped. So when you start there, you kind of work your way backward or work your way up to, okay, well, how do we get to that point and accomplish those things? And so it really starts with the coaching staff. There was talent on this team. I think you can't deny that there was talent on this team. Injuries definitely impacted it, but injuries only matter so much. And so eventually you do need to have the types of players to fill in those gaps. And there are programs around the country that have had injuries as well, and they have been able to fill in those gaps and, have success still, even though they had those injuries come up. And so I think it's probably too soon. I really don't. Even Kevin Sumlin, I was like, you have to give him time. We've mentioned Jed Fish. That first year, it looked rough. It looked like, oh, this is not the right decision. They should have hired Brent Brennan. And that was the conversation in year one of Jed Fish, and you had to kind of let it play out. And so I'm just not a big supporter of like, hey, you got to cut him loose after 1 year. I think we've talked about this before, but if I think we would see clear like, oh, this is not good for the program type of things happening. It's different. It's different than Jed Fish, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think that's been part of it as well, is there's an adjustment to like, oh, this isn't what we were used to. We were used to the dancing, cacti gifts and all like this coach kind of being out in the forefront and firing people up and, kind of drumming up support for this program. And it's different. It just feels different and it's different personalities. And so I think that adjustment has kind of maybe impacted a little bit too, where it's like, oh, he's so different than what they had before and what worked that you're like, that's bad. I don't think it's all necessarily bad. I think Brent Brennan can go about things his own way and still accomplish the goals he wants. But you have to start to see results. And at the end of the day, it's results-based business. You got to win games. And so however they can go about that, I think is going to be at the forefront for them this offseason, but I think it's going to come with some tough decisions.
Matt, Dwayne Aquina moving from DC back to focusing on the secondary. Overall, without obviously knowing who's going to take a spot, good or bad move for Arizona?
I will always defer to someone like Dwayne Aquina to figure out what he thinks is best. And obviously, if he's going to remain on staff, he thinks, hey, I can do this job and this will be more effective for the defense. I think it feels like it is his comfort zone, though. When you look at kind of his experiences before, what he wants to do, what he wants to accomplish, it feels like that is kind of his bread and butter is like, no, let me just focus on this group and get them to play as well as I can. And it feels like it'll be kind of a net positive for Arizona, I think. I think it's kind of just his comfort level. And some coaches are just, you talk about it a lot with like offensive coordinators who they're a superstar offensive coordinator and they become a head coach and it just doesn't work. They don't have the right demeanor. They don't have whatever it is. It just doesn't work. And so if this could be similar with position coaches where it's like, some guys, the DC job is just not what they do well. It takes their attention away from what they really want to do, which in this case is the secondary. And you're now worrying about, okay, what's the linebacker going to do? What's the defensive line going to do? And so, he's done it for so long that it's like, who am I to second guess what is right or wrong for someone like that? And again, if he's staying on staff, you have to figure at some point, he's like, yeah, this is the right move. And so, I think it'll be a positive thing. I think it'll give Arizona what they need in the secondary in particular. And, give him a chance to really focus on that group and get it right. And it feels like, especially when the injuries hit, where it's like, all right, it just kind of all piled on. And, that can be a great position to be in when you've been around it as long and you're used to a certain standard. And you just know you can't meet that because you're just so depleted, across the board defensively. And so, I guess like with everything, with all of these decisions, you kind of have to wait and see what it looks like. But it feels like to me, that's his comfort zone. That's where he likes to be. That's where he feels like he can get the most out of his group. And eventually that will be a good thing for Arizona.
All right, last question for you, Matt. I know transfer portal is the wild, wild west, but if not any specific players, maybe any positions that you really think Brent Brennan and his staff should focus on in the transfer portal. Like, what are the first one or two that come to mind?
Has to be offensive line. I mean, I think every program right now, if you ask any coach right now on day one or whenever the transfer portal opens up, is what are you going to look for? I think every coach would be like offensive line, defensive line. And so I think if you're Arizona, you start there. I think we know what it looks like in terms of who they're losing. Losing Big Jonah is a big deal. And you're probably not going to see the benefits of that type of player until the next recruiting class because of when the draft is, and he's going to go high. He may go higher than expected. And that'll be really big for Arizona to have that out there and be like, hey, look at this guy. He's a first round offensive lineman, or he's a high second round offensive lineman if he ends up getting that far. And that'll be huge. But in the meantime, you're going to have to sell some guys on like, hey, this is what we need. We need you right now. And so I think that's the biggest thing is going to be offensive line. They need to be able to replenish that. You've already seen some guys enter the transfer portal who have been key contributors for this offensive line. So you need to shore that up. Defensive line is always going to be important. Running back is interesting because, early on in the season when they had their full allotment of running backs, it was like, oh, this has a chance to be a really good rushing offense. And it kind of went through some ebbs and flows. Eli Sanders has been out there in Mexico running back and, an in-state guy and somebody I think that you're going to see get a lot of offers. But it could be a very similar to like a Jacob Cowan situation where it's like, hey, it's home. Arizona is home for someone like that. And that could pay off and you can get a very talented player, and because you're just, part of the hometown kind of school in that sense. And so I think that'll be something to watch, but there's going to be a lot of different opportunities for a lot of guys. They're going to send out, I imagine, a ton of offers as guys start to hit the portal, but offensive, defensive line, running back, and then quarterback is going to be the kind of the X factor of this entire thing. They're going to have to address it in some way. It could be very, very big, or it could be just making sure you have someone that's ready to go in case you need them. But a lot of what happens, and if Noah Fifita decides, hey, I'm going to the portal, I'm gonna look at my options. Arizona's gonna have no choice but to try and find a top tier quarterback. They're gonna have to because you can't be in limbo. You can't be waiting. I'm sure they're gonna have discussions with Noah Fifita if that ends up happening. And kind of alternatively, if he stays, if he says, "Hey guys, I'm locked in, like I'm here," then you can kind of focus away from that. But you still need someone else because, you lost Braden Dorman already. Anthony Garcia entered the portal, and you're gonna have to figure out, okay, what's the situation there? You obviously didn't sign Robert McDaniel, and so you're gonna have to figure out some things there at the quarterback position. I think that could jump up very quickly to being even more important than the offensive line, more important than the defensive line, any other position, depending on what Noah Fifita decides to do.
My last one for you, Matt, and I can't remember the kid's name offhand. Gio Richardson played in the state championship game the other day, sustained an injury. Do you have any intel about that? Just seems like Arizona luck, as Shane would say.
It is. It's so unfortunate. I don't have any other updated info other than doesn't sound great, and it's just so unfortunate because, that was one of those guys that you looked at in this class and you said he's going to be an impact player probably earlier than later in his career. And Vanderbilt really made a strong push. He ended up visiting Vanderbilt. Arizona hangs on to him. So that's a positive development. And then this happens. So it's just unfortunate. It's one of those reasons why I know a lot of people are like, they get down on recruits who decide to like flip or look at other options, but it's why recruits commit very early on in the process because they don't know what's going to happen. And a lot of times that means, well, I'm still interested in some other schools, so I'm going to take some more visits, but I at least want to know like, hey, I'm committed to Arizona. Most schools, especially with injuries, are going to say, no, your scholarship still stands. Like, we're still going to take you. And it's the right thing to do. And, but recruits, they get that fear of like, if I go down this season, what's going to happen? And so it's just part of the process. It's unfortunate for Arizona. but you have to imagine he'll eventually be fine. But yeah, it's definitely a blow after signing him and him really being one of the recruits in this class that shows a lot of promise for Arizona and what he could be as a college player.
Everything is flipped within a year. I mean, what we were talking about last year at this, it's just crazy how it's happened. All right, one last question for you. I know you don't follow basketball as closely. Arizona's 4-4. Is this week, in your opinion, Saturday's game against UCLA, is it a must-win for making the tournament, or is that overblown?
It's probably overblown. I think we knew there were going to be some losses. The challenge is that you're going into a conference play here soon. You're gonna lose some games. Like it's just gonna happen. It's probably as close to a must win as you can get this time of year. I think if nothing else, just for optics, for morale, for hey, like everything's gonna be okay. But wow, it has not been anywhere near the season I think anybody anticipated for Arizona this year. And I would say it's probably as close to a must win as you can have, in early December. But the losses are going to happen, and that's I think the scary part if you're an Arizona fan is you're looking at the schedule that they're going to have coming up in conference play and the teams you're going to have to face and some of these road environments you're going to have to get into, and you're going to have to start winning some of those games that maybe you're like it's okay if they lose at whatever school, maybe less so now, especially if you lose this week. And so we'll see what happens, but yeah, definitely another interesting kind of turn for a different Arizona program.
Always something, isn't it? Matt, always good to talk with you. Pencils down, pens down. Class is dismissed. Thanks, Matt Moreno, the professor, as I like to call him, from Rivals.com. Thanks for joining Shane and I.
Discover more Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino.
Hi, folks. Here are your drinks.
Where having fun means racking up reward credits with the Caesars Rewards loyalty program that can be redeemed for food, free play, hotel stays, and more. Not only here in the city of Maricopa, but also at more than 50 Caesars properties coast to coast. From Harrah's Las Vegas to Caesars Palace in Atlantic City. What are you waiting for? Play for all at Harrah's Auction Casino, the official sponsor of Play.
Great to catch up with Matt, and he kept it real, Shane. I mean, that's all you can ask for at this time of year. I mean, it's hard for us to do shows because last year was so easy. Everything was good. And we'll get those times again, but man, it's tough right now.
Yeah, no, it's tough, and I like having guys like Matt on because they're not going to sugarcoat things. I know people don't want to hear that right now. We have great guests who are not only great analysts but are are loyal Wildcats and will give us the positive spin. I just don't think anyone's in the mood for that right now. Even in the holiday season, even with my Charlie Brown Christmas tree behind me, people don't want to hear that right now. And Matt Moreno, he's not a down in the dumps guy, but he's more just a straight news, tell it like it is kind of guy. And he said, look, the recruiting signing day did not go as well for Arizona as it could have. There's reason for hope, and they have a lot of work to do, and a lot of it's going to depend on what they do with these coordinator positions, which hopefully they get situated pretty quickly.
All right, let's talk college football playoff. ASU's in it. They're in the Peach Bowl. They got a bye. Just your overall thoughts, maybe a couple of teams to watch out for, and then your championship matchup and national champion. Just at the outset, we'll pick the games one by one, but just give us kind of an overview here.
Well, I made a lot of bad picks, preseason picks for the CFP, but I did.
Haven't we all? Yeah.
I did pick Oregon over Georgia in the national championship game, and that's looking like a decent pick right now.
Yeah, really
it's
good.
funny because I picked Oregon before the season. I'm actually not as sold on them as I was at that time, even though they are number one in the country. I just think they've got some flaws that Penn State exploited in the Big Ten championship game. I still think they have a good path. I hope we get to see Oregon and Ohio State again, and I think that would be the quarterfinal matchup with it, because it got 8 seed Ohio State against 9 seed Tennessee. By the way, why aren't we reseeding these teams based on their they do that in the NFL, and there's no reason not to do that from my perspective in the college football playoff, is there?
It's an absolutely flawed system. First of all, the buys should not be based on if you win a conference. That's absolute garbage, and yet you should reseed. Absolutely.
Yeah, I've been saying that about the NFL for years. If you go 8-8 and win your division, fine, you're in the playoffs. You shouldn't be able to host a game against a 12-4 team, but that's neither here nor there. Your question was about who my national champion is. For now, I'll stick with Oregon over Georgia, but I don't feel great about it. I think Texas is probably right up there with Oregon as far as the top two teams in the country. I just think Georgia sort of has Texas's number, so it's a matter of whether Texas runs into Georgia again. But I'm going to go with since I had it preseason, I'll stick with Oregon over Georgia. I don't feel as good about it now. I think of all the matchups we have this weekend, I think the team I would most likely pick, or not this weekend, but the following weekend, the team I would most likely pick to get the upset is SMU. I think they're the real deal, and they had a really bad start against Clemson, and they almost dug out of that hole. That final drive, they deserved to go to overtime. That final drive was masterful. And it's unfortunate we didn't get overtime, but you got all the home teams are going to be favored for good reason. Yeah, I don't think any of the teams we've seen, except maybe Texas, in that first weekend, really have a shot at the national championship. Texas is the 5 seed, but they're probably still the second best team in the country.
So our picks for the Big 12 are awful. But for our semifinal picks, for our semifinal picks, I had Georgia, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oregon. We're likely to see those in the quarterfinals. You had Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas. So you and I technically are still alive. I had Ohio State over Georgia. You had Oregon over Georgia in the championship. Right. So I think we're going to see some weird stuff. I think we're going to see all the home teams win in the first round. I think we're going to see all those teams win again in the semifinals. And so I'm picking all the upsets. I think I think the 4 teams who play December 20th and 21st are going to be in the semifinals. And I think, Ohio State's arguably the most talented team in the country. I think they owe Oregon some payback. I think Notre Dame, who I never pick, is very talented. And I think they will beat Georgia, especially if Carson Beck continues to have injuries. I think Texas wallops ASU. And I think Penn State got an absolute dream draw against Boise State. In the semifinals, call me crazy, I think Texas beats Ohio State in a close one. And I think Notre Dame beats Penn State. And I think we see Texas over Notre Dame. If I were to revise it right now, Texas over Notre Dame, as of right now in the national championship. Kind of crazy. But when you look at it, Shane, my argument is this. When you look at the NFL and MLB with the teams that get the buys. Now, in baseball, it worked this year with the Yankees and the Dodgers. They got the first round bye and they ended up making the World Series. Last year, when the Rangers and the D-backs were there, the teams that played, they got the buys, did not fare so well. For the most part. So there is precedent there.
Yeah, I would say the difference is that typically, I think the best apples to apples comparison, even though there really isn't any, is the NFL. And usually the team, and now it's just one team in each conference that gets a bye. Used to be 2. That usually works out pretty well for the teams that get a bye. So I don't know if in football it makes as big a difference in terms of their cadence. In baseball, it's weird if you don't play for like a week, except maybe for the All-Star weekend. And even then you don't play. It's like a 4-day break. So I think it just, in baseball, it probably throws you off a little more. But I take your point. And I think the scenario you laid out is entirely possible. I'll revisit it next week because I haven't made every single pick yet. But it's interesting to see, will, like, for a team like ASU, is this going to kill their momentum a little bit? Because they've just gotten better week after week after week, beating Kansas State, whipping Arizona, and then destroying Iowa State. Will this, be having to sit for a week, will that throw them off a little bit? And Texas, if Texas wins, because Clemson's not going to be a pushover, but Texas, it's a game they should win. And if they do, Clemson, I would argue, is at least as good a team as ASU, if not better. Will that have them prepped better for ASU than ASU for Texas? Is that going to matter much? I don't know, but it's a good question.
Good question. All right, here we go. Let's make our picks, Shane. Arizona, UCLA, Saturday at Footprint Center. I'll be there. I don't know if were you going to that or no?
No. I'm being a bad fan.
That's
put it this way. Here's how I justify it. We're actually going to take, as a Christmas gift, we're actually going to take. We got my 5-year-old son, tickets to Monster Jam in Glendale.
Oh, that's cool. All right, fair enough.
So I spent money on that instead of the UCLA game. So that's how I'm choosing to look at it.
That's fair enough. All right, I'll give my pick first on this game. Yeah, UCLA really hadn't played anyone all that good until they went into Oregon the other day and upset them, as you alluded to earlier. This is a team that, is playing a lot better than I guess we could have expected, but who knows how good Oregon is too. I mean, Oregon's not anybody. I mean, I guess they beat, that's true. I mean, they had beaten Alabama, they had beaten Texas A&M. So yeah, I guess Oregon, pretty good. That's a good win for UCLA, better than anything that Arizona's done. It's basically a home game though for Arizona, and it's a must-win game. I think this game is going to be close. I think it's going to be gut-wrenching time. I don't know why this number just popped in my head. Arizona 74, UCLA 71.
Hope you're right, my friend. I don't got that. Like you said, UCLA just beat Oregon. They've won 7 in a row. UCLA's got 5 bona fide 3-point shooters, and Arizona's had a tough time defending the 3. UCLA doesn't turn over the ball over much, just a little over 10 turnovers a game. I think Arizona's going to have a hard time. I think maybe I'm still confident enough they're going to figure it out. I just don't think that time is in Phoenix. I think UCLA wins somewhere in the 10 to 15 point range.
Wow.
Yeah, we'll say 82-72 UCLA.
Wow, that is wild. I didn't see you going that far awry. If they lose this game, I mean, then what?
Yeah. I'm with you 100%.
You have no good non-conference wins.
Nope.
And you have to win, I mean, pretty much probably 12 in conference. You have to probably go 12-8 in conference to have any chance at that point.
Yeah. I guess the good thing is that, since they did lose to some very good teams, that's not going to hurt them too much. But yeah, they've squandered every opportunity so far to beat good or even semi-good non-conference opponents, and that includes technically West Virginia, and they haven't done it. And
yeah, I mean, Shane, Oklahoma and West Virginia right now in Ken Palm are 43 Oklahoma and 57 West Virginia. Those are bad losses.
Yeah, they're not good. No, and I don't expect them to get much better in Big 12 play. So yeah, I think I agree with you. This is not just for tournament positioning, but I think this is a game that can kind of launch the rest of your season, so to speak. It's a big confidence builder, a big momentum builder if they win, and if they lose, it's just I think it's that same thing with the football team. It's like, that you get that loser mentality starts to creep in, that here we go again, and I think it's going to be tough for them to overcome.
Let's hope we have good things to talk about on next week's show. We need it. It's been a while.
Yes, we do.
So I want to thank Matt Moreno for joining us from Rivals.com, the professor, as I always like to call him. Great to catch up with him. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. As always, as I like to say, bear down. Let's keep the faith, can we?